My brother sold our mother's jewelry before I even knew she was gone from the house she died in. He had the receipts in his car the day we stood together at her grave. I found out 3 weeks later, and I want to tell you exactly what happened when I walked into that lawyer's office with a folder full of proof. My mother's name was Renate. She died on a Tuesday in March, which felt wrong because March is supposed to be the month things start again. She had been sick for 2 years, long enough for us to pretend we were prepared, not long enough to actually be prepared. She died in her own bed in the house she had lived in for 31 years, surrounded by the things she had collected over a lifetime of careful, deliberate living. A blue ceramic lamp she bought in Portugal in 1987. A small oil painting of a harbour she won at a charity auction, and always said was probably worth nothing, but looked expensive. And her jewellery, not expensive jewellery, not in the way that shows up in estate sales, with velvet tags and spotlights, but jewellery that meant something. A gold chain with a small cross that her own mother had given her, a ring with a dark green stone that she wore every day until her fingers swelled and she had to keep it in a little dish on her nightstand. A pair of pearl earrings she wore to every family occasion, every Christmas, every school play, every graduation, every funeral. I can still see them against her hair. I am the younger of 2 children. My brother Marcus is 4 years older than me. He lives 40 minutes away, drives a car that is slightly too expensive for his actual income, and has spent most of his adult life making financial decisions that required other people to quietly absorb the consequences. Our mother absorbed a lot of them. I absorbed some too, because that is what you do when you love someone, and they are family, and you believe for a long time that love means you do not keep score. I had been keeping score for a while, actually. I just had not told anyone. The day after the funeral, Marcus called me. It was 8 a.m. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a coffee I had not touched, still wearing the sweater I had worn the day before, looking at nothing in particular. He said he had been thinking about the estate. He said it in the way people say they have been thinking about something when they have already decided what they are going to do about it. He said that the house would need to go through probate, that there was a lawyer, that we would need to meet and figure out how to divide things. He said he hoped we could do it cleanly, without drama. He used the word cleanly twice in the same conversation. I noticed that. I said, of course. I said we should be respectful of what Mum would have wanted. He said, absolutely. He said she would have wanted us to be practical. I said, yes. I hung up and sat there for another 20 minutes with the cold coffee and thought about the word practical and what it meant when Marcus used it. I drove to my mother's house 2 days later. I had a key. I had always had a key. The house smelled the way it always smelled, a particular combination of her hand cream, an old wood and something faintly floral that I have never been able to identify and will probably never smell again. Without wanting to sit down on the floor, I walked through the room slowly. I was not looking for anything specific. I was just being there, which felt important. I went into her bedroom last. The blue ceramic lamp was on the nightstand. The small painting of the harbour was on the wall. The dish where she kept her ring was on the nightstand beside the lamp. The dish was empty. I stood there for a moment. I told myself she might have moved it. I told myself maybe someone had put it somewhere safe. I opened the small jewellery box on her dresser, the one with the ballerina that no longer spun. The gold chain with the cross was not there. The pearl earrings were not there. The bracelet she had received as a wedding gift, and never worn, but also never thrown away, was not there. The small brooch, shaped like a bird that I had always loved, was not there. The box was not completely empty. There were some things left. A few costume pieces, a broken watch, a single earring without its pair. The things that would not be worth anything to anyone except as memories, and apparently those were not worth stealing. I closed the jewellery box very carefully. I sat down on the edge of my mother's bed. The bedspread still smelled like her. I sat there for a long time. I did not call Marcus. I want to be clear about that. I did not call him and ask what happened. I did not text him a question he could answer with a lie. I sat on my mother's bed, and I thought about what I knew and what I could prove and what those 2 things were going to need to become before I did anything at all. Here is what I knew. My mother had taken out an insurance policy on her jewellery 3 years earlier, after a neighbour was burgled. I knew this because I had helped her fill out the forms. The insurance company had required a detailed inventory with photographs, descriptions, and in some cases, serial numbers for pieces with hallmarks. I had taken the photographs myself, sitting at her kitchen table with my phone and a piece of white paper as a background. I had a copy of the full inventory because my mother had asked me to keep one. It was in a folder in my filing cabinet at home, under a tab that said Mom, Insurance, next to her medical power of attorney, and a copy of her will. I also knew that my mother's will divided her estate equally between Marcus and me, with a specific clause that personal belongings of sentimental value were to be divided by mutual agreement. The lawyer who had drawn up the will was a woman named Dr. Hoffman, and she had already been in contact with both of us about scheduling the estate meeting. I drove home. I got the folder out of the filing cabinet. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I had sat with the cold coffee, and I went through every page. There were 14 photographs. I had taken them carefully, each piece against the white paper. The light good, the details clear, the ring with the dark green stone, the gold chain with the cross, the pearl earrings, the bird brooch, the wedding bracelet, 7 other pieces. Every single one of them had a description, a photograph, and where applicable, a hallmark or serial number recorded in the insurance documentation. I put the folder back in my bag. I did not take it out again for 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, Marcus called me 3 times. He was helpful. He was organised. He sent me a list of things we needed to handle: the utility accounts, the subscriptions, the bank, the house. He was efficient and practical, and he kept using the word we in a way that felt like it was meant to make me feel included in something I was actually being excluded from. I was pleasant. I answered his questions. I did not mention the jewellery box. On the 8th day, I drove past a pawn shop on the other side of the city. I had not planned to. I was running an errand, and I took a slightly different route, and there it was. I sat in the car for a moment. Then I went in. I am not sure what I expected. I showed the woman at the counter one of the photographs on my phone, the ring with the dark green stone. I said I was trying to track down some pieces that had belonged to my late mother. I said it politely, and I did not explain more than that. She looked at the photograph. She looked at me. She said she could not share customer information. I said I understood completely. I asked if she could at least tell me whether a piece matching that description had come through recently. She looked at the photograph again for a long time. She said she was sorry for my loss. That was enough. I went to 2 more pawn shops over the next 4 days. At the second one, a young man behind the counter looked at my photographs and then looked slightly to the left of my face, in the way people do when they are deciding how much to say. I told him I was the estate executor and that I was trying to document items that had been removed from the estate before proper division. I used the words estate and executor on purpose because they sound official, even when your actual legal standing is complicated. He asked me to wait. He went into a back room. He came back and said he could not help me directly, but that if I had concerns about estate property, I should contact the relevant authorities and that they had a process for that. I thanked him. I wrote down the address of the shop in my phone. At the 3rd shop, I got a receipt. Not directly. I want to be precise about this. I did not get handed a receipt. What happened was this. I spoke to the owner, an older man who had been in business for many years and who seemed to have a particular discomfort with the situation I was describing. I showed him the insurance photographs. I showed him the documentation with the serial numbers. I told him that I was in the process of preparing for an estate legal meeting and that I was documenting all assets that had been part of the estate at the time of death. I mentioned very calmly that items removed from an estate before proper legal division could be subject to recovery proceedings. I did not raise my voice. I was wearing a plain dark coat, and I had my folder, and I spoke in a voice that I hoped sounded like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. He asked me to sit down. He brought me a coffee. I did not drink. He told me that a man had come in approximately 10 days after the date I had mentioned as the date of death. He told me that the man had sold several pieces of jewellery. He told me that he had a policy of recording transactions carefully for exactly these kinds of situations. He told me he would not give me the customer's name or details, but he told me the transaction date, the items sold, and the total amount paid. He wrote it on a piece of paper and pushed it across the desk to me. The total was less than I would have expected. Marcus had not even gotten a good price. I folded the paper and put it in my folder. I thanked the man. I walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a while, without starting the engine. I thought about my mother's hands. I thought about the way she used to touch the ring with the dark green stone when she was thinking, turning it slightly on her finger, a small unconscious habit she had had for as long as I could remember. I thought about the pearl earrings and every occasion they had marked. I thought about the bird brooch and how I had always planned to ask if I could have it someday when the time came, when there was a right moment to have that conversation. There had not been a right moment, and now there was no brooch. I drove home. I added the paper to my folder. I made a list of everything I had. The insurance inventory with photographs and serial numbers, the documentation from the third pawn shop, the addresses of the other two shops, the date of my mother's death, the date of the transactions. I wrote it all out clearly. Then I called Dr. Hoffman's office and confirmed our appointment for the estate meeting. Marcus called me that evening. He said he was looking forward to getting things settled. He said he knew it was hard, but that it was better to handle things efficiently. He said, and I remember this very clearly, that he hoped we could approach it without getting emotional. I said, of course. I said I was feeling quite calm about it, actually. He seemed pleased by that. I was calm. That part was true. The estate meeting was on a Thursday morning. Dr. Hoffman's office was on the third floor of a building in the city centre. The kind of office that has good carpet and framed prints and a waiting area with magazines no one reads. Marcus was already there when I arrived. He was wearing a jacket I had not seen before, slightly too formal for the occasion, in a way that suggested he thought this was a meeting he was going to win. He hugged me. He said I looked tired. I said thank you. We sat down across from Dr. Hoffman. She was a small, precise woman with reading glasses on a chain and the particular manner of someone who has seen every version of family dysfunction that an estate can produce and has stopped being surprised by any of it. She had our mother's file in front of her. She began to go through the standard items. The house, the bank accounts, the car, the furniture and personal effects. When she reached the section on personal belongings, she said that the will specified mutual agreement for sentimental items and asked if we had discussed how we wished to handle that. Marcus said, and I want to quote this as accurately as I can because I have thought about it many times since, that he thought the most practical approach was to sell anything of monetary value and split the proceeds, and that sentimental items were, in his experience, mostly just things that collected dust. He said that money was at least useful. He said it with the particular confidence of someone who has been rehearsing a reasonable sounding position and believes no one is going to push back on it. I let him finish. Dr. Hoffman looked at me and asked if I had any thoughts. I said yes, actually I did have some thoughts, and I had brought some documentation that I thought would be relevant to the discussion. I opened my folder. I placed the insurance inventory on the table first. I explained what it was. I explained that it contained photographs, descriptions, and in several cases, serial numbers for all items of jewellery belonging to my mother at the time the policy was taken out 3 years ago. I explained that I had a copy because I had helped my mother complete the documentation. Marcus was looking at the papers with an expression I can only describe as the face of someone who has just heard a sound they cannot immediately explain. I placed the second document on the table. I explained that I had visited several pawn shops in the city over the past 2 weeks. I explained that I had documentation indicating the items matching the description, and in at least one case, the serial numbers of my mother's jewellery had been sold to a pawn shop approximately 10 days after her death, before the estate meeting, before any legal division of assets had taken place. I placed the paper from the third pawn shop on the table, the one with the transaction date and the amount. I did not look at Marcus while I was doing this. I looked at Dr. Hoffman. She was reading the documents with the focused attention of someone who is very good at her job. Marcus said that was not what it looked like. I said I was not sure what else it could look like, but I was happy to hear his explanation. He said that he had been trying to protect the estate. He said that he had been worried about the house being broken into and that he had removed the jewellery for safekeeping. He said he had intended to declare it. He said the word intended with great conviction. Dr. Hoffman asked very quietly whether he had a record of the items he had removed for safekeeping. He said he did not have it with him. She asked whether he had declared the removal to the estate. He said he had not gotten around to it. She asked whether he could account for the current location of the items. There was a silence that lasted long enough to become its own kind of answer. Marcus turned to me. He said I was making this into something it was not. He said I'd always been like this, always looking for a reason to make him the villain, always needing to be the good one. He said our mother had been difficult, and he had done more than his share, and I had no idea what he had been dealing with. His voice was getting louder. The carpet in Dr. Hoffman's office was very good at absorbing sound, but it could not absorb all of it. I said I did not think this was about who was the good one. He said I was doing exactly what I always did, being calm and precise and making him look bad. I said I thought the documents were doing most of the work on that front. Dr. Hoffman put her glasses on and said that she needed to be direct with both of us. She said that the removal and sale of estate assets prior to legal division was a serious matter. She said that depending on the documentation and the amounts involved, it could constitute a breach of estate law. She said she would need to review the situation carefully before proceeding, and that she strongly recommended Marcus consult his own legal counsel. She said all of this in a tone that was completely level and somehow more devastating than shouting would have been. Marcus said this was insane. He said it was a few pieces of old jewelry. He said we were family. Dr. Hoffman said that was precisely why these matters needed to be handled correctly. The meeting ended without resolution that day, which I had expected. These things do not resolve in one room, in 1 hour. What happened over the following weeks was slower and more procedural, and in some ways more exhausting than a single confrontation. Marcus hired a lawyer. His lawyer communicated with Dr. Hoffman. There were letters. There were several conversations I was not part of. There was a period of about 10 days where Marcus sent me 3 text messages that I did not answer, and then stopped. The outcome, when it came, was this. The value of the jewelry that had been sold was calculated based on the insurance documentation and the pawnshop records. That amount was deducted from Marcus's share of the estate before any other division took place. He did not lose everything. The law is not built for maximum drama, but he lost a meaningful portion of what he would have received, and he lost it in a way that was documented and official and impossible to reframe as a misunderstanding. He also lost the ability to tell the story the way he had intended to tell it. That matters more than people think. He had planned, I am certain of this, to be the practical one, the efficient one, the one who handled things while his emotional little sister got lost in sentiment. That was the version of events he had prepared. He had the jacket for it. He had the vocabulary for it. He had rehearsed the word practical until it sounded like wisdom. Instead, he was the one who sold his dead mother's ring for less than it was worth, before the body was cold, and got caught with a folder full of photographs and serial numbers. I do not know exactly how he tells the story now. I suspect he tells a version in which I was vindictive and calculating, and turned a family matter into a legal proceeding. I suspect some people believe him. That is fine. The people who knew my mother well enough to matter know what her jewelry meant. They know what the pearl earrings look like. They know about the ring. I got some of the pieces back, by the way. Not all of them. The pawnshop had already sold 2 of the pieces on to other buyers, and those were gone. But the ring with the dark green stone had not been sold yet. The owner of the third shop, the one who had written down the transaction details and pushed them across the desk to me, had held it. He had not said he was going to do that. He had not promised anything. But when I came back, after the legal process had moved far enough to allow for it, the ring was there. He said he had a feeling about the situation. He said he was glad someone was paying attention. I paid him what Marcus had received for it, which was less than it was worth, but was the amount that made sense under the circumstances. I put the ring on my finger in his shop. It fit. I do not know if my mother and I have the same hands, or if I have spent enough time watching her hands that I carry the shape of them somewhere in my own. Either way, it fit. The pearl earrings are gone. The bird brooch is gone. The gold chain with the cross is gone. I have the photographs of all of them, the ones I took against the white paper background at my mother's kitchen table, and I have kept those photographs in the folder with everything else. Sometimes I look at them. It is not the same. It is not supposed to be the same. It is what I have. My mother's house sold in June. the blue ceramic lamp from Portugal I kept. It is on my nightstand now, the same nightstand where her ring used to sit, in its little dish. And sometimes, late at night when the room is quiet, I look at it and think about how she picked it out in a market in Lisbon and carried it home in her luggage, and never once thought it was anything other than exactly right. The small painting of the harbour I kept too. It is on my wall. I do not know if it is worth anything. I do not care. It looks expensive, and my mother always said so. And that is the whole story of it. I have not spoken to Marcus since the estate was settled. I'm not sure I will. I have thought about what it would take to have a relationship with him again, what he would need to say or do or understand, and I keep arriving at the same conclusion, which is that the gap between what I would need and what he is capable of is too wide to cross with the energy I have available. I'm not angry about that in the way I expected to be. I thought the end of a sibling relationship would feel like an amputation. It feels more like setting down something very heavy that I had been carrying for a long time without fully acknowledging the weight. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty, if I think I was too hard on him, if I think maybe there was a way to handle it within the family, privately, without the lawyers and the documents and the formal consequences. I understand why they ask. We are taught to believe that keeping the peace is the same as keeping the family, and that keeping the family is always worth the cost. But here is what I know. My mother spent 31 years in that house. She spent a lifetime collecting small things that meant something. She wore the pearl earrings to my school play when I was 9 years old, and I can still see them. She turned the ring on her finger when she was thinking, and I learned what it meant when she did that. I learned to read the small language of her hands. She gave those things weight and history and meaning over decades of ordinary life, and then she died, and someone who was supposed to be her son drove them to a pawn shop 10 days later and sold them for less than they were worth and called it being practical. I was not going to let that be the end of the story. Not because I needed revenge. Not because I needed to win. But because someone needed to say clearly, with documentation, in a room with good carpet and a woman in reading glasses, that those things had value. That the history in them was real. That you cannot just decide because it is convenient for you. That memory is only a kind of clutter. I have the ring. I have the lamp. I have the painting. I have the photographs. I have a folder in my filing cabinet that I will probably never need again, but will never throw away. And I have, for the first time in a long time, a very clear sense of what I am willing to carry and what I am not. That is not a small thing. That is, I think, what my mother would have called being practical.